Football made simple. Become great at your craft by finding ways to make it simple for those around you. This is the Coaching 101 podcast hosted by Findaway Productions with your co-hosts, Daniel Chamberlain and Kenny Simpson. What's happening, coaches? This is the Coaching 101 podcast. I'm Daniel Chamberlain. That is Kenny Simpson. Coach, the season is closing out. I don't know if it's because of the temperature or what, but it seems like everybody in the north and northeast, they're done. They're like, I was on with some Jersey guys last night, and they've already played their first round of playoffs. Mm-hmm. So the fact we're still in week 9 or going into week 10 is, I mean, I like it. I like ball to last longer, but also it's really hot in the summertime, and I don't really want to be playing a game on like August 1st or back into, July or something. That'd be crazy. I like them later starts.
Oh yeah. No, we think Oklahoma and Arkansas probably are married up because we're going into our senior night, and then of course if you were good enough to make the playoffs, you've got a couple more games, and then Arkansas apparently is like Texas where they just want to have as many rounds as possible. So if last year we played like into December 5th or 6th, and if you give a good year, you could play all the way to mid-December, which is a lot of games. And so
football, baby.
And it depends where you are as a program. Some guys are, they're excited about making the playoffs, and we've been there before where you're in it, and that's an accomplishment in and of itself. Then you've got other programs, that now they're kind of going, okay, now the real season is starting. Now it's time to just kind of show who we are. I think in Arkansas, 3 or 4 classes most years are pretty much a foregone conclusion. You kind of know these are the 2 or 3 teams or one team that's probably going to win it. I'm sure Oklahoma's similar. This year, I feel like in our state, probably there's 2 or 3 classes where it's as open as it's probably ever been. And it's going to be really cool to see who makes it because, and I know in our classification, probably the one right below it, there's probably 9 or 10 teams that if they got hot at the right time, could make a run. So it's going to be a really interesting postseason. Where kind of last year you knew these were probably your 3 or 4 teams. This year seems like there's just better football all across the board. So a lot of competition to go.
I can't remember. Do you guys have the religious private schools? Do they play in your playoffs or do they have their own?
They have to play up, and then they have a competitive equity type deal. So a lot of them are playing maybe 2 or even 3 classes above us. If they're successful, they win a state championship, they kind of get bumped up. And so Arkansas is not big enough really to have its own private school deal, but it's pretty unfair to try to have them together. So a lot of times what they'll do is, if they're very successful, they'll move up a class and then move up another class till they kind of find this is probably where they need to be.
Yeah, we've had that historically. There was a bunch of lawsuits and stuff last year, and I don't want to speak too much on it because I don't remember all the details. But essentially, I think they're getting rid of the competitive bump up, so they're just going to set at whatever size they are. So I think it's a lot of people frowning upon that right now, but.
Yeah,
they do make. You were talking about having foregone conclusions. Like we kind of know in those classes which teams, and sometimes it's those guys. So
it was that way in Arkansas probably about, I want to say 3 or 4 or maybe 5 years ago, where it was like private school, all one, and so something had to be done. And I'm not anti-private schools. Good for you. But let's call a spade, and it is an advantage to be able to cherry pick who you want, and to have 2 parents with most kids, and that's a great thing. Nobody's upset about that, but it's also not fair to probably have them competing with, public schools that face a lot of other challenges.
For sure. Well, quick, if you don't mind, Coach, give us our quote of the week.
Yeah, pretty simple this week. I went with Thomas Edison. It says, "There is a better way. Find it." I know we're going to be talking a lot about coaching today, but the idea is, in my mind, the idea is twofold. One, if you're not successful, it's really obvious. Find something else. However, when you start to really study people that are very successful in the coaching world and really in any world, they don't just say, okay, this worked, let's just do this all the time. They are always looking for what's a better way. How can I get a little bit better? So I know it worked, but can I make it more efficient? Can I make it even better? I think that's kind of the mindset that we want to have as a coach, and we want our kids to have is, there's always a way to get better. How can we find that?
Absolutely. And if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably one of the guys that understands that because, it's just another learning mechanism, I think, out there, another tool to have in the toolbox. Yeah. So let's jump into it, man. Real quick, if you don't mind, share some other ways a coach can make things simple for his staff and athletes. All right. So I know we got 7-0. We got the clinics. And then didn't you have another book that is about the?
It'll come out probably later on. Yeah, it'll come out a little bit later. I've got it done. I'm just got to get it, finished up.
Okay. I'm going to grab my coffee pot real quick. Give me a second. Can't talk ball without the nectar of the gods here. All right. Sweet. Well, let's get right back into it. Here we go. Appreciate that, Coach. We want to thank you once again as we've jumped into season 7 now on the podcast, this being episode 2 of season 7. Those guys that are sticking with us and have been with us for a long time, Ace Sports. If you have not reached out to Mark or any of the guys in Ace Sports, you need to. You're wasting time. You're kind of, we call it the cheat code of fundraising. Kenny's done it at multiple schools now. We've got a lot of our followers who have done it at their schools. Big school, small school, doesn't matter. Please reach out to them and see what Ace Sports can do for you in your fundraising and just amplifying your environment, right? Just taking what you have now and elevating it. So please reach out Ace Sports, mark.bridges@acesports.com. And of course, Doug over at Winning Edge Performance Analytics. I'm interested to see what he does in the offseason to grow what he's got already, because he's got a great product now, and then to see what guys can do to use that in the offseason and get better at it. So check out those guys. Go talk to Doug. Go talk to Mark. Coach, I know we have the clinics coming up. So the first one's going to be right before AFCA, right there in Charlotte. Talk to me about your clinic dates.
Yeah, I think we've got 9 total ones. So I'll be Charlotte. First one is in January. We've got all over. So Charlotte, we've got them in Batesville, San Diego, Sacramento, Boston, Milwaukee. I think we're going to Minneapolis this year as well. I'm sure I'm forgetting probably some of them. There's several all over the place. So going to be a chance to kind of see, how you install the offense. These are very unique clinics. Daniel, you've been to several of them. They're not your normal clinic. Not that there's anything wrong with those. Go to those too. But these are very, very targeted and very specific to, here's how we install the gun tee. Here's how we teach, our drills. And then we have player demonstrations. One thing we've kind of started doing the last year or two is we've started bringing in a guest speaker. Most of them either run some variation of the gun tee, or they're just a friend of mine that I know will do a good job offering kind of a defensive or another type of topic. So I'm working on setting those up now. My goal is to always have, 2 or 3 different guys potentially at the clinics, but they're really geared for guys that want to run the gun tee or run some kind of shotgun wing tee, shotgun gap scheme type offense. So it's been really good. They usually will sell out. A lot of them, we get to capacity pretty quickly. We are doing through Thanksgiving, doing what we call early bird pricing. It helps me to kind of know roughly how many guys are coming, helps the host school to know who's coming. So the earlier guys can register. It's just way more helpful. So to kind of encourage that, there's lower pricing now than there will be after Thanksgiving. And then, of course, as you get closer to the event, there is a chance that it could fill up and we run out of space. We had that happen, I think, at a couple, maybe last year or the year before, where we had to kind of cap it because that's all the room we had. We want these to be intimate, where guys can come and ask whatever questions they have. So I don't really like having more than 100 coaches. So
Right.
Because of that, they do tend to fill up pretty quickly. So make sure you do register if you want to go. We can do school or booster club, POs, and all that stuff too. So email me if you got questions on that stuff, or We'd love to have guys there. Then, like Daniel mentioned, it's a good chance for vendors. So I know Mark comes to a lot of my clinics. So if you're a vendor, wanting to promote your project, maybe double dip. I have a lot of guys, they'll come to the clinic as a coach, and then they'll use it as a business write-off with their vendor deal, and we can work that out too.
Yes. The vendor thing is really nice. I mean, there's a bunch of coaches that obviously are interested in improving what they have. And I think that's why it's such a good market to get your product in front of. Going to the AFCA or going to your state one, that's a bunch of guys that are going because a bunch of guys are going generally, right? They're not really looking to spend the monies or really do an improvement. When you go to a clinic that's as intimate as Kenny's, those guys are there obviously because they want to make improvements in their program. So not saying those other clinics are bad to go to and set up a booth, do that. This is just another opportunity to do the thing. So awesome.
Yeah, 7.0 is coming out too. So we got I don't know when this podcast comes out, but I would bet you that the 7.0 is right around the corner because it's supposed to come out mid-November. It'll be over at fbcoachsimpson.com, and it's got all the stuff we did this year. So, we added, speed option in this year. We added what we call a flash motion or a quick motion with our running back. It really married very well with our offensive scheme, very simple RPOs you can run off of it. I think I posted one in the group we ran another night where, we're running, looks like old Utah stuff where you have the option swinging out the running back or you can pitch the counter underneath. We started marrying all this stuff together. So been really, really good. I think it'll help a lot of guys. And again, if you're trying to evolve your offense, or you're in the gun tee, it's probably a good book to add to your collection.
1 second, Kenny. We have got an issue where we are no longer live.
Okay.
We're going to hit the button. Actually, I'm going to turn off the intro video this time. We're going to try this again. Now it says we're live and 14 people are watching. Okay. Hey, if you guys have been watching, I'm sorry. We had a little technical difficulty where everything just shut off on my end. So, all right. Well, we will post all the ads and everything there. Go check out the 7.0 Gun T book. It'll be coming out. If you're listening live, you're a couple weeks-ish away, maybe 1 week away over at fbcoachsimpson.com. And then check out the clinic dates. There are a ton of clinics this year. Get to one of them. There's one in every region of the United States. You can figure out one that's driving distance, I'm sure.
And we do have, hit me up. We don't really try to offer because we really think the live is just so much better. But I know guys, sometimes that's not a possibility. So we do have the recordings option. Hit me up and I'll kind of show you where to go get that.
Absolutely. All right, man, let's get into talk here. Kenny, we're talking today about keeping a coaching staff together. As we understand that there are some staffs out there right now that are counting jerseys and sanitizing helmets for the last time and kind of putting things away, organizing because seasons come to an end, right? Especially after this comes out, after post-editing, it's going to be maybe any of our, we may be done. We're both playing games this weekend. Well, Kenny, you're probably okay. You're probably safe. But we're in a win and get in kind of scenario. So we go to War Friday, and if we come out victorious, then we are in the playoffs. If not, I think that our season comes to an end after 10 weeks. So, anyway, there's going to be a time here where coaches are thinking about leaving. They're thinking about new jobs. I think as a head coach, to keep a program together, keep that continuity has got a ton of benefits if you can just have the same guys coming back next year. So that's kind of what we're talking about, the benefits of doing that, why coaches like to leave a staff and where they would, what would draw them away, and then what you can do to kind of put a halt to that. So let's jump in the first part here and just what are the benefits of keeping your coaching staff together?
Well, a lot of them I think are kind of obvious, but the first thing is being consistent. Like we're kids and coaches know what to expect, and you're around each other, and there's something to be said for an experienced staff and having gone through, like you mentioned, different trials together where you've been in a situation where maybe you failed as a staff, like you needed to do this and you didn't, but you get another chance with the same guys, or you had success with that staff and you learned this is what worked for us, and now we can take that and make it even a little bit better. But there's something to be said for consistency. Usually programs that are good, they're not changing schemes and changing coaches every year. Like that's usually a sign of a program that's not successful. If you see that, hey, they're changing their whole defense or their whole offense again, or they're changing their whole coaching staff again, generally that's not going to be a very successful program, because the consistency alone of people knowing what to do and becoming better at what they're doing year after year after year after year matters. Also, if a guy's been there long enough, like I've been here, I've been involved with the younger levels. And so we can see what's coming and make modifications along the way for what's coming. And then those kids are used to what we're doing. They kind of know what to expect. So that consistency, I think, is something that you can't speak too much of. I think you start to learn your coaches. Like on my end, I start to learn my coaches over time. And every year we seem to have one or two, and it's not like we always have the same exact staff every year. But I've had a lot of guys I've been with now for 8, 9, 10 years.
Yeah.
And I kind of learn what their strength is and what they're good at. And you can give them a lot of, autonomy to do their job. Coach Gould, I've been with him now for quite a bit, where we communicate, but he pretty much has autonomy on that offensive line. And he pretty much has autonomy and control working with different things that we do outside in our program. Like we do different community events where he kind of has one of those. It's a strength of his. He's really gifted with being in front of people. So we do like our mother's son date night. He's kind of the DJ, the guy that does that. And that's a little thing, but you start to kind of learn what they can do. And I've got a special teams coordinator I've been with now for, I think, 12 years. So we talk, but I'm not going to go micromanage because I know we've been through it. We're a new guy. You don't really have that. You kind of have to make sure you're synced up together, and they have to earn that autonomy. First year guy on my staff, I'm going to be pretty hesitant to give him a lot of jobs that I'm not making sure are getting done.
Right.
Year 2, year 3, year 4, that kind of goes away. And you start to learn who can do what, who's gifted at what. And it's not just like at a position, not just a quarterback coach or a DB coach. That does matter. Sometimes you look at, okay, this coach, he kind of struggled here, but man, I think he could do good at this position. But you also look at, like in our program, we try to do a lot of off the field things, community involvement deals, fundraising, budgeting, inventory. There's all that stuff that goes into being a head coach. And I try to delegate as much of that as I can. Ultimately, I'm responsible for it, but why not use guys that are gifted in those different areas to do that stuff? So you kind of learn that over time. You can also have those harder conversations. Bo and we can go at it, and I know that he's not going anywhere, and he knows I'm not going anywhere. And we know at the end of it, we're going to be buddies, and we're probably going to get on a plane together and go do an install together. So we could kind of have conversations that might be more difficult to have with somebody who you don't have that relationship with, where they're not going to just leave, And so I think that doesn't give you the right as a head coach to belittle people, or an assistant coach to belittle the head coach. And that's not how that works. But it does allow you, hey, we're close together. We can have these conversations. We can disagree. And I'm not concerned about him taking that out and sharing it with the public or any of that stuff. And I'm not concerned about him leaving and taking another job. And he's not on the other end, hopefully, concerned that I'm going to do the same. We're not going to fire a guy because he disagreed with me. That's not how that works. But you don't get that year 1, 2, 3, 4. You get that over time. Over time, where you've built that, relationship. And so that's the kind of stuff, to me, you kind of got to go through the fire together and some of that stuff to build it. It's not a marriage, but I do look at coaching as a relationship. I don't look at it as a boss and his workers. I think when you get in this world, everything is relational. And you got to build that. And the only real way to do that is time. And so I think that's the advantage for staffs that are able to retain their guys.
You mentioned a lot about relationships, and I think although we're going to get into some X's and O's, we're going to talk about, how that benefits, and I'll even speak on that here. I think the relationship has to be the first part. There's nothing I've been a guy on the staff for the first year, 5 years out of my 6 years coaching, right? I've been the new guy. And man, it's always so weird because you don't know really what, it's not necessarily what you can or can't do, but whose toes you're going to step on, right? And it's a very weird situation to be in, to come in and have some knowledge and you have a way you do things. Still to this day, I make an extra copy of all of the game film we're breaking down, and I do like an entire staff's job on the side because I do things a weird way. I do things a little bit different. The last couple of years at Bristow, I'm too far away to be there on the day in and day out, so I'm not there to really pick up and learn from those guys how they're doing it. So I've just been doing my own way on the side. But if you're on a staff and you have a way and it's not the way everyone else does it, it can be somewhat difficult to give up how you've always done it and learn their way. So once you've been there a year or 2, 3 or 8 or 12, all that kind of goes away. So you kind of get that trust and that relationship of how things are done. You mentioned it, like you and Bo can still kind of have those arguments, but for a lot of guys, those arguments have been had. We don't have to keep regurgitating that stuff. I always think back to my year at Stillwell when I was there with Bo Collins and all the guys, and we kind of had the dream band together. But there wasn't as much arguing, but there was definitely some. We've got to get this thing done, a non-negotiable. Something I've stolen from you and used a ton. We're not getting our non-negotiable done. So how are we going to solve that? But once you've been together a while, you've had that argument, and this is what is allowed and this is what isn't allowed. I think the pecking order obviously is kind of aligned. If you get a new guy in, he doesn't know where he fits. Where does his knowledge put him? Where does his football IQ put him? His position and title, where does that put him in the pecking order? And someone that's been there 10 years but didn't get the coordinator role, and now there's a year one guy, that might throw a wrench in there, right? I think the biggest one, though, for me on the relationship side is knowing the head coach's wants, needs, and the don't do's. So what are we absolutely not allowed to do at halftime? Can you go out and install a new run play because nothing's working? Or is your head coach a no, let's add a tag, let's figure it out, let's get back to fundamentals kind of guy? So filling that out. Obviously, on the podcast, we're not a install a new run play at halftime team, but what does your head coach want to do? What do they go to? What bag of tricks do they go to? Kind of what are you allowed to do as an assistant coach? And then what do they need from you Monday through Thursday, right? Or Saturday through Thursday, I guess, for some of you guys. I think the community between the families. So that's something my wife has definitely missed, and we're trying to build back into it this year. But when your wife can call another assistant coach's wife and just go have a lunch or a dinner, or what if someone gets sick and the kid, you need a babysitter for the kids, and my wife's at home. So those are all things I think as you get into this, you alleviate the issues that a coaching staff can go into because you've built your tribe or your community, your village, whatever you want to call it, right? And so you have more resources just because you've been there longer. Those resources start to add up. And when if a new coach moves into your area, Coach Simpson, I have no doubt that they would get pretty much all access to that. But if you hadn't been there this long, that wouldn't exist, right? And if you were rotating and flipping guys all the time, that wouldn't exist. And then the last piece with X's and O's, I think, you really earn a trust to bring things to the system. You run the gun T, you put out a book every year about the new things that you put out. Are they all Kenny Simpson's ideas? I'm sure that someone else is like, hey, dude, I saw this team do this. It fits our system. I didn't want to put it in mid-year, but now we're in the offseason. Let's look at this. Maybe it's a passing concept or a new way to run a play, whatever it is, right? You kind of earn that with guys. Yes, you know what? Once again, they learn what you do and don't like, what you will and won't put in the system, but they kind of get that trust to where a year one guy, you're constantly rolling over. I've been on teams where you're getting the TikTok play of the week, right? And it's like week 4, and you're like, hey, coach, can we put in GT counter bash? Because I saw it on TikTok, and it looks really good. Well, does it fit our system? Do we read defensive linemen, right? Like, does it fit what we do? Mm-hmm. So as years go on, those coaches have been around a while, will understand more of what the system actually entails. Maybe they've had more time to wear you down about reading a defensive lineman. I don't know, but you'll kind of figure out what the do's and don'ts. But you earn that trust to bring things into the system, and now next year we can grow. Our system can get deeper and bigger, if you will, because more people have got eyes on it. And like you said, if there's a better way, find it. Well, if you have more people doing that, you will find a better way, the best way, if you will. So I think those are just some of the ways that keeping the staff together benefits kids. We didn't even talk about like the practice and understanding fundamentals and how this team works it. I love the way that Coach Gould coaches your down blocks, and there's various ways to coach a down block. If you hire a new O-line coach, he may not understand all that or may not get the point across. So, kids are just going to continue getting better because the staff is stuck together. Let's jump to the second part here, Kenny. Why do most coaches leave a staff, and how does that usually affect your program?
I mean, I can just guess on a lot of these. I think they're relatively obvious. I think number one, most coaches are going to leave for an opportunity for growth, and that could speak poorly against your program, or I think it could speak positively. We had to replace a coach this year. He took a head coaching job. And I've had to replace another coach a couple of years ago. He took a head coaching job. So those are good things as an opportunity for them to grow. I wasn't willing to, fire myself and give them the head coaching job. So for them to move up the next step, they kind of had to go somewhere else to do that. And so, but it could also be a negative thing. Like if you're not allowing guys to move up and sometimes the head coach, you kind of do that on purpose because they need to leave. Like they're good enough at the spot they're in, but you don't see them moving to the next spot, whatever that spot might be. So generally, I would imagine coaches, leave programs as an opportunity to move up, and however they see that fit, maybe have a bigger role, be a coordinator, be a head coach. I think that's probably the number one reason. Number two, it could be a family type situation or money. It could be a chance to move up to a school that's going to pay them more, or it could be some kind of family deal where they're go be closer with family, or their wife's unhappy. I think a lot of good coaches, and I don't know who's listening to this podcast, but a lot of good coaches are ruined by their wives. And I don't mean to be ugly to the wives, but I've seen a lot of good coaches where the wife's not on board. That's very difficult for that guy. I can't imagine being that guy because my wife's not like that. But I know there's a lot of them I've kind of seen where it feels like wife's not really on board, doesn't really want to be there. Those guys, that's a very tough profession to kind of live separate lives. So yeah. I think that's another situation where maybe it's some kind of family issue, or a lot of them will leave the profession because let's be honest, you don't get paid a lot coaching high school sports. So that's probably reason number two for me. Reason number three, it could be something's disgruntled on the staff. Maybe you're unhappy with your role on the staff, or you're unhappy with the coach's scheme choices, or you're unhappy with the way the coach treats you, or you're unhappy with whatever it is. And by all means, that's the great part about the country we live in is you can go find somebody else to work for. So I think that's probably reason number three. It might be reason number one for some guys listening to the podcast, but for me, I think that's reason number three. And then I think a lot of times coaches will leave because they don't think the place they're at has the chance to achieve the success they would like to achieve, whatever that level is for you. You might be at a place where, hey, our ceiling, in my opinion, is the playoffs, or our ceiling, in my opinion, is winning conference, or our ceiling is whatever, and you want to go to a place that you think has a higher ceiling because you want to chase being more successful like that. And there's nothing there's anything wrong with that. I think it's a reality of some places you're at a school where you don't have the vision of them actually being able to achieve X, Y, or Z. And that's one of your goals, is to achieve whatever that might be. So, Daniel, you might be able to speak more to this. I'm on the other end of it as a head coach. That's probably the reasons I see why coaches leave, but I mean, you're in the boat where, you might leave. I don't know if you're going to leave your current job, but you might leave whatever job you're at because you've probably had some of these.
Yeah. No, it's you covered a bunch of them. I have left some places. I've been moved out of some places. Like it works both sides, right? I think most of our moves have been about just trying to get closer to home. It's never, not never, but generally not been because of the staff we were with. It was just an opportunity to come up closer, and then those don't always work out either. So unfortunately, sometimes you move for a thing and that thing doesn't even work. So um, I think some of the reasons that lack of leadership or a leadership style that we don't get along with. I will never be able to work under a micromanager. It just doesn't work for me. Whether it be my years in the military, whatever, I've been taught to be autonomous, a free thinker, go out and critically think and think around this corner. And I love being able to do that. And so, that's something I won't be able to live in that leadership style. I would have to leave. I would do my job. I'd fill out a contract and I'd have to go somewhere. And I think there's a lot of people are like that. Some guys need that rigidity. They need that micromanagement because they just don't know what they're doing yet. But I think, most guys who have some football IQ, some knowledge are probably going to be able to be free thinkers, and they want to be able to add to the coaching staff, right? It's kind of what we talked earlier. Can they bring things in? Can they kind of do it on their own? Can they make up their own football drills, or are they stuck going out of a manual from 1975 or whatever? So I think that's one deal. Just a lack of leadership, and I've talked a lot on this because I've written a bunch of articles for your magazine. I've written a bunch of them on the internet, just about what leadership is, and it's not well coached in the coaching industry, unfortunately. Like, it's generally whatever your head coach did as a football player is kind of what you think leadership is. And those aren't always the best because that's just it's just a long line of the same stuff. I'm not saying there aren't good leaders out there. It's not usually passed down really well. So that is a reason you get into these staffs, you get into a job, and then all of a sudden there's that lack of accountability. I'm a big extreme ownership guy, so a guy who wants to blame everybody else. If your head coach is always blaming the staff or the players, or we're not good enough, or we're too small, there's always a problem. That's something some guys aren't going to want to stick around with. Administration, parents, and community. Those are things I think that can run off a coach very quickly, and it stinks if you're a good coach and you're trying to build a good program, but those things are against you. Have been at a place where I watched the head coach walking down the hall after I think we started 2-1 or 3-1 that season. We were being pretty successful. The team had never had that many wins in a season in like 15 years. We did it in the first 4 or 5 games, whatever it was. And the staff was asking him, where are you going to coach next year? Because you will not be here. They will run you off. And he was like, nope, it's not going to happen. 100% happened. 100%. If you outshine another sport, or if you show that, hey, success is possible here, that's not something they're ready for. And that was terrible. That stinks. But that is a reason that coaches have to leave. So, and that may be something you have to be asking as you take these head coaching jobs. You take these, what does that bridge look like? Is it actually built, or is it on fire because, we can't get far enough away from those people? But I think those are reasons that will push a coach out. They will have to leave. Even if you as the head coach have got it made, they understand the way you do things. But another guy comes in and is a shining light. Maybe they just can't handle that. So I think you have to be careful there. Those will push coaches away. You already talked.
Sorry, Danny, I was going to say, I'd even say, like, we talk about being somewhere a long time. Sometimes when you're somewhere too long, you kind of become your own worst enemy. I've been here now at this school for 12, 13 years. So I'm sure that, start doing the math. If I made 2 kids mad every year, I'm up to 25, and if they're vocal and they're a problem, it's tough. And you see that all the time where some coach has been somewhere for 20 or 30 years and they're trying to run them out just because he's now old. Now what he's done is old fashioned, and see that a lot where guys were really successful for a long time in one place, and then now they've all of a sudden maybe didn't have the success they did, or alienated the wrong person. And so I would say to be very careful. Nobody's untouchable.
That's right.
I feel like every day I come into this job, I'm coaching for my job, and I've been here for 13 years. I better give the best and understand that it may be the last year. You never know.
Yeah. We went to Texas. I took with Mark and went down there, We talked to Bruce Bush, who is a legendary coach, did it for many, many, many years in Texas as a slot T guy. And he said, he moved around a little bit, and he said every 6 to 7 years you better change venues, because that's kind of when you've turned it around, you've had your couple of years of success, you've reaped the reward, or the fruit you sowed, and then you better get going, because otherwise they'll find a way to get you going. So I mean, that's two of you right there, right? Legendary coaches that have said the same thing. You can stay somewhere too long. Let's jump in this last part, Coach, and then we'll get into the situation of the week. What are we doing when our best coach leaves, and how do we make that a growing opportunity, kind of with that resiliency mindset?
Yeah, this question works well for me, because I think we lost ours. I had a guy here that was a shining star. I think he's a head coach now, that I think he was. And we got a lot of really good coaches. I'm not going to say he's our best coach, but he was a very, very good young coach who it hurt to see him leave. My son is a senior this year. He was hurt, but that's part of he understood it. He wasn't like mad at him because he left to be a head coach, but we lost a really good one. So you have to kind of evaluate, okay, not one guy is going to be able to fill this shoe. It's unfair to ask one guy we're going to go out and hire to fill all these shoes. So the first thing we looked at is, okay, is there somebody on staff we can promote from within? So when you lose a good person, is that a possibility? Like, is it possible that, hey, this young coach has been doing really, really well. He has a desire to move up, take on a bigger role. So we want to try to do that if we can. I want to try to always give our young coaches the opportunity to move up so they can further their career. They can see that, hey, coach recognizes I'm doing a good job and he wants to give me more than I can do. Not always possible. Sometimes they don't want to move up. Sometimes it's not really a fit for that position. So that's not always possible. But I think it's important as a head coach, if you can do that, you're going to get a lot more loyalty from your staff. I've gone in the last 4 or 5 years here and fought for more money or more days or more, better, a better situation for my coaches with our administration. And our administration is great. I don't want to act like I'm complaining. I'm not. But I've gone in for these coaches and advocated for either them to maybe get a little more money, or maybe for them to get a little better schedule, or maybe a better X, Y, or Z, whatever they've asked for.
Right.
And some of them we've got. And I think that lets your coaches know, hey, coach has got my back. He's willing to help me. He's willing to help me move up. Doesn't mean they won't ever leave, but it does mean, I think, you create loyalty there with your staff. And one of those ways you create it is they see that, oh, this guy moved up. Maybe I can move up the next time something comes open. So I do think that's the first thing we're going to look for. Second thing we're going to look for is, I want to go hire the best possible person. So go back to the situation we just had. Real life, we lost a really good coach, head coach. I didn't we did advertise, but I made a lot of phone calls to a lot of people that I really respected. And the guy that we ended up hiring never applied. It was a guy that I went after and found, because I thought this guy is special, kind of a shining star. He's going to be a really good one. He was not the same position. Like, we lost a guy who was an offensive-minded guy. We brought in a guy who's, he's getting better on the offensive side of the ball, but he's much more gifted on the defensive side of the ball. Like, that's kind of where his background was, but he's really, really good. And so let's hire that guy and shuffle some stuff around, because he's the best candidate. He's the best coach. He may not be, fit in the box of, he's not really a this coach or that coach. Well, we can move our coaches around because I've got good coaches. I've got guys that can take on different responsibilities. Last year for me, I got to be more of a head coach. The guy who left took a lot of play calling. Like, he didn't call a lot of plays, but he called several big ones. The coach we just brought in, more of a defensive coach. Well, now I've dug more into offensive, and he's been a great asset to them. He's been a great asset to both of us. But the head coach, shifted where a lot of my time went from one coach to the other to allow us to hire the best coach possible. Instead of, well, you're a real good candidate and a real good coach, but we're looking for X position. Like, I think as a head coach, you've got to be willing and able, where you've got to school yourself up enough where you can do that, or you're going to miss out on good candidates. And I think that's not a good place to be, where you're having to turn somebody down because maybe they don't fit exactly that. Then we asked a couple of our other coaches, hey, I need you to take this part of what, our coach did. So you can't just fill one guy's spot with one other guy. You got to kind of bring other guys in to, hey, you take this portion and you take that portion, you take this portion. And then this guy can, as he gets more comfortable, can take more responsibilities on. So that's how we try to do it here. I don't think we're perfect in any way, shape, or form, but I do think that it's important as a coach, go find the best people, and usually those guys are going to become gifted, because the guy I'm talking about now, he's came over as a defensive guy, but he's been ingrained in our offense, and now he's at the point where he's starting to take some of those responsibilities because he's a good coach, and those guys tend to figure it out.
I think anytime an opportunity opens up like this, it's great for the staff to practice that resiliency we teach kids all the time, right? You're always telling the kids, like, whatever job you're given, something I've always said is, if you're going to be a state championship team, somebody had to be the state champion starting middle linebacker for the scout team. Like, that had to be some kid's job all season long. And so it's a great place to put coaches here, is like, if we're going to go out and do this, we're going to do it really well. There has to be a special teams coordinator. There has to be an inside linebackers coach. There's got to be a guy that's counting up heads as they go on for the special teams to go do whatever, right? Like, you need all those positions. When something like this opens, it's pretty wonderful to be able to bump those guys up. Like you said, Kenny, can you fill it in-house? Of course, maybe they're not ready yet, and you have to go outside and pull in another guy. Either way, I think you're showing you're having those coaches practice that resiliency, right? The landlocked positions is what I'm calling it. Just like the coordinators are never going to leave. That's what happens when you're in a great coaching staff, right? When you're in a great program, guys don't want to leave. They'll be there 10, 12, 15 years. That's generally when guys have put pride aside, and not that their ambitions have gotten any lower, but they understand going out and being a head coach at this 0-10 team probably isn't going to have the same effect on my career as sitting here and getting to the third, fourth championship game, whatever, round of the playoffs every year, right? And learning from a guy who's doing it really well. So there's some guys that can put the ego aside and not go chase the head coaching job. And by the way, I don't mean anything. I know your guy did leave to get a head coaching job, but some got to do it. And I don't know what his success will look like in the next 5 or 10 years. I'm not going to judge anybody on year one. Heck, he might be 10-0 right now. I have no idea. I've not actually kept up. But point is, some guys can just sit around and understand that as a team, we're going to be better. I have another friend of mine in Northwest Arkansas right now, and he's like, dude, we have 10 prior head coaches on one coaching staff right now. Like, all the head coaches are on one staff, and everyone's kind of working together, making it fit. Same thing when I worked with Bill Blankenship. He just kept building these elite rosters of coaches that were all, had a lot of head coaching experience or 25 years of coordinating experience, whatever. They definitely could go out and get a head coaching job, but they just want to work with the greats. I think that says a lot about the program. All right. We forgot to drop a situation of the week. I actually was going to type it while you were talking, but I started listening to you instead. Let's do a can we do a what not to do as a coach, or do we need to skip it all together?
You can do it. Yeah, that's fine. I think the big thing you kind of mentioned it, Daniel, is understand, like, when you're trying to move up, because if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably one of those coaches going, all right, do I stay? Do I go? In that world, and there's not a right or wrong answer. However, I do want to say this is something that a lot of coaches hear and they don't really hear. There are bad jobs. Like, there are a lot of bad jobs, and there's a reason those jobs are open. And while I was ambitious as everybody, I was 27 years old when I got my first head coaching job. Like, I knew I wanted to be a head coach since I was 21. Like, I was a guy that would apply for a head coach job at 22. I know I'm not ready, but I want to do it. Be very careful, very, very careful about the job you take, because, you know, a lot of coaches, when you're taking your first head coaching job, there are few good jobs and there's a lot of not good jobs. So be careful that you don't just jump into, I'm taking the first thing that's offered to me, because especially as a young head coach, as a new head coach in a bad situation, it's usually not a good mix. Usually not a good mix. So just be careful. I'm not telling guys don't take that job down the road, but I am saying, you know, be patient when it's easy to not be patient.
Yep, I love it. I can't remember who said it, but I heard, you know, good jobs don't come open. And obviously, Southside came open at some point, and you took that job, and it's a good job.
It was not a good job when I took it.
Right. I don't know the complete truth to all that, but you said it earlier. Even as you hired a coordinator, you made phone calls, and you hired a guy who didn't even apply.
Right.
That job was never really open to the, you know what I mean? Like maybe some applicants got a good, like you went through their stuff, but the job never really came open. You were filling it in a different route the whole time. So unfortunately, yes, you can. I've been in many interviews, and I think my lucky stars right now that I didn't land some of these jobs that I thought I was the number 2 applicant, or I thought I had it sewn up and didn't make it. Because you just watch, and the stuff that you're telling yourself, I can fix that, you probably can't.
Yeah.
Right.
There's a couple of truths that most guys need to know. One, the former coach wasn't as dumb as you think he was. And 2, you're not as smart as you think you are. And those are 2 hard truths that you need to kind of understand when you look at these bad jobs.
I love it. That's awesome. All right, man, let's close it out and get out of here. One last time, I want to mention our sponsors, Ace Sports. If you don't have a video board, or if you have one that's old, a scoreboard that's old, if you've still got to go replace the little iridescent light bulbs, we've got a thing for you, and it's called technology. Check out Ace Sports, mark.bridges@acesports.com, or you can contact me if you have any questions. You don't want to bother Mark or whatever. Ace Sports is amazing. One, the product is better than everything else on the market. Okay, their product is going to last longer. It is a better quality. 2, they come in and hold your hand and show you how to pay for your board. They help you pay for your board through the ad revenue, and they will get you back in the black before they go on about their business. But they leave you with that playbook, with that game plan, so you can continue being successful for years and years and years to come. Ask Kenny. He's been doing it for a long time now. And then Winning Edge Performance Analytics. If you haven't spoke with Doug, like, I realize this season's over and you're probably not going out and getting a product that's meant to use on game night, but you need to start looking forward to it for next year. Okay. I think it was a wonderful asset for us. Once again, if nothing else, you just buy back your coach's time. And if you can pay a small amount of money to get a coach's time back, so on Saturdays or Sundays or whatever, if you're not having to go in and input all that data from your game because it's already tagged up, man, it was really, really nice this season to have that be the case. Yep. Social media, I am at Coach Chambo OK on Twitter/X. You can email me at chamberlainfootballconsulting@gmail.com, and check out the YouTube, but I don't know the exact thing. You can look up Coach Chambo OK on YouTube. It'll find me. Kenny, where are you at, sir?
All things FB Coach Simpson. So FB Coach Simpson at Gmail, at FB Coach Simpson on X, and then FBCoachSimpson.com if you want to sign up for the clinics or if you want to get books or whatever.
Perfect. Podcast is at Coaching 101 Pod on Twitter/X. We want to thank you for being a listener of the Coaching 101 podcast. We hope you'll join us next week as we continue to make the complex more simple. Please consider subscribing to the show so you'll always know when the new episodes are out. We'll leave you with this. It's hard to beat someone who never gives up. No matter the situation, find a way.